Chapter 21. Prenatal Influence. Dr. H. W. Long, a physician, psychoanalyst and neurologist, after subjecting the problem of prenatal influence to a scientific investigation, has come to the conclusion that it is a reality. In his book, Motherhood, he cites a large number of cases which have come under his observation, showing a definite correlation between the mother's psychological condition during gestation and the character of the resulting child. Many great men have owed their talent to prenatal influence. Napoleon's case is described by Dr. Long as follows. Napoleon's mother is considered by some students of history to be even more remarkable than her famous son. During this gestation, she accompanied her husband on a military campaign, becoming acquainted with many of the officers, had the walls of her room hung with paintings of many famous generals, and was deeply interested in all military matters. It has been said that she had her accouchement couch covered with a tapestry depicting one of the battles of Thermopylae. Van Dyck's mother was a talented artist. She was diligently engaged in the work which she regarded as her masterpiece, while pregnant with the child who was to make her famous in the history of art. It was a large composition in colored silk entitled Susanna and the Elders. During Goethe's gestation, his mother, under her husband's instruction, devoted her time to study. Goethe inherited his poetic and imaginative temperament from her. Schopenhauer's mother, during her entire period of pregnancy, lived alone in a country villa, in whose library she cultivated her literary tastes. Charles Kingsley acquired his talents from his mother. In faith that the impressions made on her own mind before the birth of the child for whose coming she longed, would be mysteriously transmitted to him, Mrs. Kingsley luxuriated in the romantic surroundings of her Devonshire home, and gave herself up to every sight and sound which she hoped would be dear to her child in after life. Her hopes, we know, were fully realized. Samson's mother, in accordance with an angel's command, abstained from the use of wine and meat during gestation. She held in her mind the thought of her son's future life work, that he would lead his people against the Philistines. Buddha was afforded exceptionally favorable prenatal conditions. The king rejoiced exceedingly, and gave orders that all care might be taken of his queen during her pregnancy, that wherever she might be surrounded by that which was pure, melodious, harmonious, refined, elegant and simple. The mother of Confucius, before the birth of her child, heard a heavenly voice predict his destiny: the son of the essence of water shall succeed the decaying Chou, and be a throneless king. During Alexander the Great's gestation, his mother lived in a temple, in the company of a great Egyptian philosopher. Concerning the prenatal history of Apollonius of Tyana, we read: during the period which preceded his birth, his mother was favored with a kind of annunciation sent by the god of divination and penetrative science. Proteus appeared to her, and informed her that the child of whom she was pregnant was an incarnation of himself. The following is recorded concerning the mother of Saint David of Wales: as her womb was growing, the mother, for the purpose of offering alms and oblations for childbirth according to current customs, enters a certain church to hear the preaching of the gospel. Gildas, the preacher, says, "The son, who is in the womb of that nun has grace and power and rank greater than I, because God has given him status and sole rule and primacy over all the saints of Britannia forever." One thing was clearly manifest to all, that she was to bring forth into the world one who in honorable status, effulgent wisdom, and eloquent speech would excel all the doctors of Britannia. Before the birth of Thomas Aquinas, a rough hermit with flowing hair, like Elias, who gained a name for his godly life, pointed to a picture of Saint Dominic which hung from an image of the Blessed Virgin around his neck, and exclaimed, "Rejoice, O Lady, for thou art with child, and thou shalt bring forth a son, whom thou shalt call Thomas, and thou and thy husband shall make a monk of him." A similar man came to the pregnant mother of Saint Francis, predicting her child's destiny. Prenatal influence is affected through the maternal blood. Since the embryo is a condensation of elements derived from this blood, the chemical quality of the latter will influence the development of the unborn child. The factor which may most immediately affect the blood's chemistry is the mother's diet. If the mother's blood is toxic, as a result of the use of drugs, alcohol or tobacco, the resulting child will be physically and mentally subnormal. Dr. Tilney, the neurologist, in speaking concerning his proposed research work, Along this line, said, "We shall be able to determine departures from the normal standard in children whose mother has suffered from some poisoning prior to childbirth. Such poisoning may be due to alcohol, tobacco, bromides, or veronal. The next step will be to determine whether this deviation is sufficient to retard the mental development of the child. We might discover that tobacco or alcohol produces a mild deviation from the normal, and that a certain dietary deficiency in the expectant mother or an injury to her liver is responsible for maladjustment in a child, which results in a savage or unsocial outlook on life. On the other hand, great purity of the mother's blood, as occurs when no meat or wine is used during gestation, will lead to the birth of a superior child. The mothers of Krishna, Samson, Buddha, Jesus, Saint David and Hanshin lived upon a vegetarian diet during gestation. The blood passing from the mother to the child contains internal secretions, chemically representing all organs of her body, and reproducing these, in miniature form, in the embryo. Between the ductless glands of the mother and the organs of the embryo, there is even closer relationship than between these glands and the mother's own organs. These glandular secretions, which are greatly influenced by the organic minerals in the diet and by impulses from the central nervous system, registering psychological states, profoundly affect embryonic development. A weakened or sickly condition of any member of the mother's body, due to a glandular and dietetic cause, will result in an improper development of a corresponding organ in the embryo, and inversely, an exercising and strengthening of any maternal organ, accompanied by an increased secretion of associated ductless glands, will enhance the growth of a corresponding embryonic organ. This relationship, prenatal influence, takes place directly through the blood. Physical and psychological traits are inherited in this way, rather than through the germ cell. Inheritance of paternal traits, as in the case of the Bach family, is due to prenatal impression by the mother of the qualities the father manifested during gestation. There is an interdependent relationship between the ductless glands and the organs they control. The thyroids, for instance, are associated with cerebral activity, and the exercise of those maternal brain centers which these glands control will, through the influence of their hormones, augment the growth of similar centers in the embryo. As there is a relationship, through the blood, between the bodily organs of mother and child, so is there one between the respective parts of the brain. The thoughts, images, perceptions, aspirations, and ideals in the mind of the expectant mother will, in this way, materialize themselves as potential cerebral faculties in the embryo. Emotional states, because of the different glandular secretions by which they are accompanied, may affect, for good or ill, embryonic development. These glandular secretions, produced by thoughts and emotions, will activate the growth of similar ductless glands and brain centers in the embryo, thereby laying in the child the physiological basis for the reappearance of the psychological faculties which the mother has exercised during gestation. The phenomenon of protective coloration illustrates the capacity of an organism to reproduce on the surface of its skin that which its senses perceive. Stigmatization and hypnotic suggestibility demonstrate that the human body possesses similar capacities. If the perceptions, mental images, emotions, and thoughts of a woman are able to affect the cells of her own body, even those of peripheral regions, surely they must have a far greater influence upon the plastic substance of the embryo. That we do not as yet know the exact physiological mechanism by which this is accomplished does not invalidate the reality of the phenomenon. Potential genius, along any line, may be ensured in the coming child if the pregnant mother concentrates upon the cultivation of these abilities, especially when these express her own natural endowments. Dr. Long says, by and by, parents will come to understand that by giving special attention to any faculty or quality they desire to have reproduced in their offspring, they can have their wishes gratified just in proportion to the intelligent effort expended. The following is a typical case recorded by Dr. Long. Case 136, Mrs. W. is somewhat musical in her tastes, as is also her husband, and when she found herself pregnant, they began together a systematic study and practice of music. They enjoyed the work, attending all the concerts possible, and frequently went to dances where they might hope to hear good music. The son resulting from this gestation began very early to show a taste and talent for music, both vocal and instrumental. His cleverness and skill were so marked that he was considered a prodigy by many who heard him, and is now a professional musician of high standing. Riddell, in Prenatal Culture, reports the following case: a man who came from an inventive family, who was not a mechanic, undertook to produce a mechanical invention, and worked on it prior to the birth of his son. During gestation, the mother became much interested in the invention and entered eagerly into the study with him. The boy born under these circumstances began his inventions before the age of 10. At 25, he had produced over 20 original inventions and double as many improvements, several of which paid well. That this inventive genius and originality of mind were largely the result of prenatal training is proven by the fact that the older children show very little mechanical ingenuity and scarcely a trace of originality, while children born after the inventive son showed more inventive talent than the older one, but have not the inventive power of the one who received the special prenatal training. The varied characteristics of children born from the same parents and raised in the same environment can only be explained by the prenatal theory of heredity, not by the germ cell one. Children born from the same father, but from different mothers, as illustrated by the children of Abraham and by those of the father of Daniel Webster, who had children by 2 different wives, always take after their respective mothers. Not only the father's psychological traits, but also his physical traits, are transmitted to the child through prenatal influence, rather than through the germ cell. Where parents were separated during gestation, as were those of Leonardo da Vinci, Schopenhauer and Oscar Wilde, there was little paternal resemblance. The father is usually the mother's prenatal model, whose image is implanted upon the embryo. Dr. Long says, in Italy it has been observed that many of the children resemble the pictures and statues of the child Jesus, as a result of the mother's adoration of the Madonna. The Weismannian germ cell theory, though applicable to animal reproduction, cannot explain the phenomena of human inheritance.